The idea of presidential candidates getting into questions about contraception within a relationship between a man and a woman, a husband and wife, I'm not going there.
Mitt Romney said he wasn't for the Blunt Amendment right before his campaign put out a statement saying, oh yes, he is. It's another fine example of the carefully crafted messaging of the 2010 Republican presidential campaigns. Plus this.
Now let's get at the business at hand and focusing on our economy, focusing on jobs, and stop making women's health care a scapegoat for what you think is wrong with America.
But then again, perhaps the Republican jihad against modernity should continue, so we can see how that works out for them in November. The agenda starts right now.
Now, Nevada's premier source for political commentary. Informed opinions about the issues affecting you. From the right, Elizabeth Crum. From the left, Hugh Jackson. This is The Agenda.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Elizabeth Crum, commenting from the right.
And I'm Hugh Jackson, commenting from the left. Senate Republicans, including Nevada's very own Dean Heller, doubled down on the culture wars this morning. We'll have more on the so-called Blunt Amendment and hopefully a larger discussion of health care's impact on Nevada campaigns in a minute. And we'll also have an update from the presidential campaign trail. But first, Shelley Berkeley isn't a liberal. Now, I've been saying that for years, but the Democratic Congresswoman and Senate hopeful's centrism has been gauged quantitatively again this year, as it is every year in National Journal's annual vote ratings issue. Berkeley is ranked the 159th most liberal member of the House, which is to say she's pretty much a centrist. But Joe Heck, the Republican congressman, has planted himself firmly in the middle, such as it is these days, as perhaps befits a freshman candidate in a competitive district. There are 214 Republicans more conservative than Heck, or so says National Journal. Meantime, 17 Democratic senators are to the left of Harry Reid, who is always being accused of being far more liberal than he actually is. And the aforementioned Dean Heller is but the 28th most conservative senator, placing him firmly in the middle of his Republican caucus. And now, Elizabeth, I suppose you would like to celebrate the moderation of Joe Heck.
I don't know about celebrating it, but I've pointed out many times that he is a moderate, and that when the Democrats try to tie the Tea Party mantle around him or try to hang the albatross of Sharon Angle and others around his neck, that it's just not a good fit. He was a moderate when he was in the state legislature for the most part, depending on the vote, depending on the issue. And I think he has a great chance of re-election in the fall for that reason.
I have a little bit of a caveat to all of this before we go ahead and declare Joe Heck some kind of raging moderate. You know, the center has virtually vanished in Washington, D.C., and there has been this incredible polarization between left and right, but that polarization has been asymmetrical, and I've tried to educate you on this before, which is to say the Republicans have moved far further to the right over recent years than the Democrats have to the left. I'll give you an example. We'll be talking about the health care legislation later. You know, the legislation that Republicans attack so much, including Dean Heller now, is essentially the same legislation that was favored by Republicans like Bob Dole and the Conservative Heritage Institute just, 15, 20 years ago.
I think that's a valid point on health care. However, you know, policymaking boils down to more than just that, and we'll argue more about this at another time. And as we roll merrily towards Super Tuesday, including contests in a few southern states, is Newt Gingrich, like the gallant Wesley in The Princess Bride, dead or only mostly dead? The Agenda's national correspondent, Emily Schmidt, joins us now live in Washington with that story. Good afternoon, Emily.
Hi, Elizabeth. This new national Gallup poll that is out today really shows a big shift over the past week. Mitt Romney up 8 points, Rick Santorum down 10 points. The person who hasn't changed is Newt Gingrich, who remains right at the same place where he was with 15% support. Now, Gingrich is going into Super Tuesday without a recent win, and time may be running out.
Thank you to everyone in South Carolina who decided to be with us in changing Washington.
January 21st, Newt Gingrich storms past Mitt Romney to take the South Carolina primary. Since then, he's 0 for 8 and hoping Tuesday puts his campaign back on track.
The primaries next Tuesday in many states really matter.
That's because 10 states head to the polls, including Gingrich's home state of Georgia. He's hoping a victory there, as well as other southern states like Tennessee, can turn things around.
Governor Romney can raise more money because he can go to Wall Street and get money from all the people who got bailouts from the taxpayers.
But Gingrich's biggest challenge may not come from the frontrunner.
You know what? We're doing all right.
Rick Santorum is having more success doing what Gingrich tried to do back in January, present himself as the conservative alternative to Mitt Romney. He picked up 3 victories early last month and fought Romney to the end in Michigan.
I'm a conservative, and they know it.
So for Gingrich, he has his work cut out for him. Come Super Tuesday, it's all or nothing.
Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
And how super is Super Tuesday? Well, listen to this. There are 437 delegates up for stakes, more in one day, about 2.5 times more than all the delegates that Mitt Romney has picked up thus far. So certainly the opportunity is there for Newt Gingrich if he is able to seize it. Elizabeth?
There's an opportunity, but he took a hit this morning or recently. I believe a major newspaper down there in Georgia endorsed his opponent, Mitt Romney, correct?
Yeah, Gingrich has really looked at Georgia as a do-or-die place. He has that home state support, except from the Savannah Morning News, the largest newspaper in that region right now, and they came out endorsing Mitt Romney today. Listen to this plain language. They say Newt comes with more baggage than a luggage carousel at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. What it's basically saying, it believed that moderate independent voters just would not go for Newt Gingrich. That's why they said they were picking Romney. All interesting and not necessarily the news that Newt Gingrich was looking for.
Great line there from that paper down in Savannah. Thanks for that report, Emily. We appreciate it.
The Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta has some lovely artwork in the corridors.
It does. I've flown in and out many times.
And I must commend you on your reference to the gallant Wesley in The Princess Bride.
One of my favorite movies.
I would also reference or paraphrase a line from Princess Bride, however, and go back to what we were talking about at the top of this segment, and that is moderate. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Very clever, very funny. We can argue more about that.
All right, so are Republicans going to keep running on social issues all the way to November? I hope so. Could Democrats be that lucky? We'll discuss the controversies over health insurance, including today's Senate vote on birth control coverage, with a Nevada defender of the Obama administration's Health Care Reform Act. That's when the agenda returns right after this.
Welcome back to the agenda. In a dramatic vote that is being politicized far and wide, including in the Nevada race for U.S. Senate this morning, Democrats defeated a Republican effort to reverse President Obama's controversial policy on contraception insurance coverage in the Senate. The blunt amendment would have allowed employers and insurers to opt out of portions of the president's health care law they found morally objectionable on religious grounds, including the requirement that insurers cover the cost of birth control. Republicans have rightly said that this is a matter of freedom of religion, while Democrats have painted it as a war on women's rights. Nevada Senator Harry Reid voted to kill the measure, calling it an extreme ideological amendment, while Senator Dean Heller voted for the amendment, saying the issue is one of, yes, religious freedom. Heller correctly said that the debate today is about one thing and one thing only: whether the federal government can force religious organizations to provide a service that violates their faith. Joining us now to discuss this is Annette Raveneau, Communications Director of KnowYourCare.org, a defender of the President's Affordable Care Act, and presumably an opponent of the blunt amendment. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So your response to my commentary?
I am concerned that you're thinking that it's right that women should be, their rights should be taken away from them.
I don't think their rights should be taken away. I think what the president and the Democrats should agree to is to simply allow other avenues for discounted or paid for contraception to reach the women who want and need it, and not force it down the throats of religious organizations who object to it on moral grounds.
Well, definitely women should always have the rights. We've had them for many years. A lot of women, again, they don't use it necessarily for birth control. They use it for other medical benefits, and that's something that many women already benefit from. And I think it's the right for all women in the United States to have that right.
Well, let me follow up with that. I mean, Elizabeth has characterized characterized this in purely religious terms, but this Blunt Amendment, of course, did not confine itself to purely religious issues. It also said that employers could decline to provide insurance coverage under their plans for anything to which they objected morally. That's a pretty huge loophole. As Secretary of Health and Human Services Sebelius described this, any employer could restrict access to any service they say they object to.
That is correct. And thanks to the Affordable Care Act, Nevada women really have that possibility of having free preventive services. And that is huge for women, especially here, that we are really suffering with low wages, unemployment. So we definitely need women here in Nevada to have the access for health care, free preventive services for sure.
I have long said, and I'd like to hear what both of you think about this, that this goes right to the heart of a problem with American health care, which is that the delivery system for most people does come through their employer. And I would be in favor of just eliminating that entirely and giving people enough other options, whether it's a government option or whether it's a private option or whether it's a public-private partnership option, and just take employers out of the picture altogether. That would solve this entire problem.
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act definitely does a lot for people here in Nevada to be able to have options. Definitely, if your employer offers health insurance, you have that option of getting that insurance. But for instance, people that have a pre-existing condition that right now they've been kicked out of their health care coverage. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, Nevada people in general would be able to participate in the pre-existing condition insurance plan, which a lot of them have already benefit from it, and thousands of people here in Nevada do not know. And basically that's the reason why Know Your Care is here in Nevada, educating the community about the Affordable Care Act, the different provisions that the law offers to the community, so then they would be able to benefit from that.
You know, I was amused, as I think many of us were, even Elizabeth, by Mitt Romney's flip-flop on this issue. It was within the span of about, I don't know, 47 minutes that he that he switched on this. When you look at the Republican candidates and these social issues running into the campaign, how do you think that's going to play in Nevada? And just very quickly.
Well, I find that it's just sad. I don't think it's funny at all, because they are playing with Nevada's people, our health care in general. Children that have a pre-existing condition insurance before the Affordable Care Act, they could just be kicked out of their parents' health insurance because of that. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, that does not happen anymore. Yeah. Young adults right now would be able to then stay in their parents' health insurance until they're 26, which is something
We'll pick up
wonderful.
on some more of that in just a minute.
We sure will. Our discussion with Annette Raveneau will continue right after this.
Welcome back to the agenda. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as Republicans and some slothful members of the media insist on calling it, placed some modest regulatory reforms on the private insurance industry. It implements some cost-saving measures and ultimately will extend health insurance coverage to millions of people who have none. Naturally, this is the greatest threat to liberty, morality, prosperity, motherhood, and Western civilization itself since the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD, or so some would lead you to believe if you listen to the law's critics. Defenders, meantime, point out that the law already prevents insurance companies from denying coverage for pre-existing conditions, bans insurers from dropping patients when they need coverage most, and reins in a host of other insurance industry abuses. And again, it will ultimately provide health insurance coverage to millions of people who have none. We're continuing our discussion with one of the law's supporters, Annette Raveneau of the group Know Your Care. Now, I mentioned that ultimately this will provide coverage to millions of people who have none, but that's not going to happen now. When does that kick in? When are people going to actually see the true impact of this legislation?
Well, it depends on who you ask, of course. The true impact is already kicking in for many people here in Nevada. If you're a small business owner, for instance, you already can enjoy tax credits that are already there since 2010. And if you, as a small business owner, have not taken advantage of that, if you offer health care for your employees, you definitely could even do an amendment to get those tax credits back. Pre-existing condition insurance plan, something that we mentioned prior. Anybody that has a pre-existing condition can apply for that, even though they've been kicked out or denied health coverage. Children under 26 years old could stay in their parents' health insurance. Preventive services for women are going to be kicking in August of this year. There's so many things that are so great about the law. Unfortunately, a lot of people do not know about them, and that's why we're here.
And one of the concerns with all of that and with the Reform Act as a whole is that we still have a Supreme Court decision pending on the individual mandate, which, if struck down, will fundamentally change a key part of this legislation. It's been a burden, I think, on Nevada and other states to try to comply with what's coming down the pike right now, while at the same time trying to sort of head things off at the pass a little should that individual mandate be struck down. What do you say to that?
Well, we don't think it will be struck down, but of course we have to wait until the Supreme Court decides. Nevada is one of the states that is really implementing, it's one of the best states that is implementing the Affordable Care Act, the exchange or the marketplace, as people could call it.
Why is that? Why are we ahead or behind the curve, depending on your point of view on this?
Because Nevada thinks that it's important, and a lot of states are not doing so. But Nevada is definitely
do you credit the governor for that? I mean, who's driving that in Nevada to make sure that these things are being implemented in a timely way?
Well, I think the governor has a lot to do with that, although he's not necessarily happy about the law itself, but he's definitely putting in place. It has to be done, so he is following the law.
Yeah. Well, and it should be pointed out too that when you look at the extent of people who are uninsured, Nevada consistently ranks at the top or bottom, as the case may be, as having some of the highest percentages of uninsured adults in the country. And so if anyone could use the kind of subsidies and assistance to buy health insurance that come along with the Affordable Care Act when the mandate kicks in, it is certainly Nevada, perhaps more than any other state in the country.
I think that's so. I'm not as confident as Annette is that this mandate is going to make it through the Supreme Court. I think it's interesting. We've got dozens of states bringing their case before the Supreme Court. I think it's one of the biggest, as we said, one of the biggest social issues of our time, and I think it'll have a big bearing on what happens in November.
Well, yeah, and Heller and Berkeley, as we mentioned earlier, they're flying the releases at each other today about this whole issue. But listen, Annette Raveneau of Know Your Care, thank you very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. All right, Elizabeth and I will be back with some final thoughts right after this.
Journalist, author, Merry Mischief Maker, and my friend, the irrepressible and irreplaceable Andrew Breitbart.
This nation and freedom has lost a great proponent and defender. Andrew Breitbart, who is reported to have died this early morning in California, was and is an American hero of mine. This man, in what appeared to be in the prime of his life, knew that the key to keeping our endowed freedoms was shining the bright rays of sunlight on whatever issue was stealing away our nation's prosperity and liberties.
Welcome back to the agenda. All right, Elizabeth, clearly the Democrats feel they have struck gold with this women's health issue. You can see the releases that they're flying out this morning, attacking Romney for his war on women. And you can also see that it's starting to have an effect. For instance, Heller's release comes out essentially defending his policies on women's health care, mostly listing a bunch of negligible and inconsequential small things, but at least trying to put out some kind of effort to say, no, I love women too. So clearly the Democrats think that they've got something that is working quite well.
Well, yes, when you paint it in terms of a war on women and denying women their rights, that's going to be a winning message in some ways. But Dean Heller is right to push back, as are all the Republicans who oppose this very insidious, I think, part of Obamacare. And I just don't understand why the president and the Democrats feel as if they have to push this through Obamacare. If we want to provide contraception either free or at a discount to women in this country, there are plenty of ways that we can do it. We don't have to run it through religious organizations that object to it.
But again,
that's such a small percentage anyway.
But again, this whole business of covering contraceptive care was ubiquitous throughout the nation, including a lot of institutions, universities, hospitals that were owned by the Catholic Church, was not an issue It went through the health care bill. As I've suggested to you earlier, the administration was blindsided by this controversy. They didn't think it was going to be that big a deal because it was so common.
I don't think so. I think it was very calculated. I think that they knew exactly what they were doing. Please tell us if you agree. Drop us an email at theagenda@mynews3.com or go to our website at mynews3.com/theagenda, and you can post your comments there, which we will post here on the air every Friday.
And coming up tonight on Face to Face with John Ralston at 6:30. Clark County's new district attorney is striking out with the public on his first big decision. Steve Wolfson says it's not in the community's interest to prosecute the cop who kicked a motorist in the head. We'll let him explain that, or I guess John will, on the next Face to Face tonight.
And tomorrow on the agenda, we'll be joined by Republican political consultant Robert Eitoven to break down Nevada's most interesting campaigns, including both the primary and likely general election matchups in the brand new 4th Congressional District.
I love it when Republican consultants come on. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Hugh Jackson.
And I'm Elizabeth Crum. Have a great afternoon.